The gavel felt like a death sentence in my hand. Not the physical weight of it, that was negligible, but the symbolic crushing force of what it represented. I sat rigid in my velvet seat, the auction house's oppressive air thick with perfume, old money, and the stench of betrayal. 365. That number had become my prison, my purgatory, my daily nightmare. 365 private moments. 365 stolen intimacies. 365 Polaroids of my soul, captured during the most vulnerable period of my life, now being paraded like trophies for the vultures of Crestwood City to devour. Damon stood at the podium, immaculate in a Tom Ford suit that I had personally selected for him last month, his face a mask of calculated indifference. But I knew that expression. I'd studied it for 7 years, through candlelit dinners and whispered promises, through hospital vigils and boardroom triumphs. The slight tightening at his jawline betrayed his pleasure. He was enjoying this. Reveling in it. The man who had once sworn before my parents' graves that he would shield me from all harm was now the architect of my public evisceration. Lot number 1, his voice echoed through the chamber, smooth as poisoned honey. Aria Sterling. Age 26. The night of our engagement. Starting bid, 2 million. The screen behind him flickered to life, and I felt the oxygen leave my lungs. There I was, bathed in moonlight, wearing nothing but the sapphire pendant my mother had given me, the pendant that had been in our family for 4 generations. The image was artfully shot, I'll give him that. Damon had always had an eye for composition. He'd studied photography at Yale before dropping out to take over Sterling Industries after his father's sudden death. That had been the story, anyway. One of many convenient fictions I'd swallowed whole.
10 million, a voice called from the back. Victor Cross, a venture capitalist with a reputation for collecting damaged things. 20 million, countered another. The bidding escalated with obscene speed, each number a fresh violation. This wasn't about the money. This was about power. About humiliation. About Damon proving to Crestwood City's elite that he could reduce his own wife, the last heiress of the once mighty Chen Enterprises, to nothing more than a commodity. I had discovered his plan 48 hours ago. A misplaced phone. A text message that flashed across the screen while he was in the shower. Asterisk the auction set for Thursday. All 365 photos cataloged and ready. She'll be ruined. Asterisk the sender was Serafina Vale, the 23-year-old influencer Damon had been mentoring for the past 8 months. The same Serafina Vale who now sat in the front row, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars, her lips painted the exact shade of crimson I used to favor. Damon had always been meticulous. That was part of his charm. He'd documented everything. The early days of our marriage when I still believed in us. The nights he'd coax me into trusting him with a camera, promising the photos were just for us, for our private collection, for the memories we'd share when we were old and gray. He'd been planning this all along. Every intimate moment had been cataloged, tagged, and prepared for this single moment of annihilation. Going once, Damon's voice cut through my thoughts. Going twice. Light the lantern. The words left my mouth before I fully registered the decision. The auction house fell silent. Lantern lighting was Crestwood's most brutal bidding tradition. Whoever lit the lantern agreed to pay 10 times the final bid, regardless of how high it climbed. It was the nuclear option, a declaration of war. And I had just invoked it with less than $100 million to my name. Damon's eyes narrowed. Miss Chen. Don't MS Chin me, Damon. You started this game. I'm finishing it. Light the lantern. Serafina turned in her seat, her perfect face twisted in a sneer. Aria, darling, you can't even afford the champagne they're serving. Don't be pathetic. I ignored her, keeping my gaze locked on Damon. You taught me the rules, husband. I have the right to light the lantern for any lot I choose. Those are the terms you wrote into the auction charter yourself. He hesitated. The charter was ironclad, and Damon never broke his own rules in public. It would make him look weak. Very well, he said finally. Lot number 1. Lantern lit by Ms. Aria Sterling. Final bid stands at 40 million. Lantern price, 400 million. The room erupted. I could feel the eyes on me, the speculation, the hungry anticipation of my inevitable ruin. They thought I was bluffing. They thought I'd be escorted out by security, bankrupt and broken. They didn't know about the phone call I'd made at 3 a.m. this morning, sitting on the bathroom floor with my mother's ashes clutched to my chest. They didn't know about Xavier Knight. The name alone was enough to send tremors through Crestwood's financial district. Xavier Knight, the shadow king of Knight Global Holdings, a man who'd built a trillion-dollar empire from nothing while the rest of us were still figuring out how to file our taxes. He'd left Crestwood 7 years ago under mysterious circumstances, and his return had been whispered about in boardrooms for months. I'd known him once, before Damon, before the world had taught me that trust was a liability. He'd been my brother's best friend, my childhood protector, the boy who'd taught me how to throw a punch and how to read a balance sheet. 2 days ago, when I'd found Damon's texts, I'd done something desperate. I'd pulled out the business card Xavier had pressed into my palm at my parents' funeral, a card I'd kept hidden in my mother's jewelry box for 7 years. The number had still worked. His voice had been the same, smooth, controlled, with that undercurrent of steel. I need $100 billion, I'd said, the words tasting absurd even as I spoke them. Done, he'd replied without hesitation. But I don't give gifts, Aria. I make investments. And I expect a return. Name your price. Your freedom. And a seat on the board of whatever we build from the ashes of Sterling Industries. I'd agreed. Of course I'd agreed. I'd have sold him my soul if he'd asked for it. But Xavier hadn't wanted my soul. He wanted my vengeance, properly executed. Now, sitting in this auction house with the lantern lit over my own degradation, I felt the first flicker of real power in months. The auctioneer was speaking, his voice a distant buzz. Miss Sterling, as per protocol, we must re-verify your assets before proceeding. By all means, I said, my voice steady. Verify away. Damon stepped down from the podium, moving to stand beside Serafina. They made a striking pair, both beautiful, both ruthless, both utterly devoid of conscience. This is embarrassing, Aria, he murmured, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Just walk away. I'll let you keep your dignity. My dignity? I laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. You auctioned off photos of me sleeping, Damon. You sold videos of our most private moments to men who've been trying to get into my family's business for decades. Dignity left this marriage the moment you decided to monetize my trust. The auctioneer's assistant approached, tablet in hand, his face pale. He whispered something to his boss that made the older man's eyes widen. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, there seems to be a discrepancy. Miss Sterling's accounts show a balance of $100 billion, transferred this morning from an offshore holding company. The silence was absolute. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. Damon's face went white, then flushed an ugly red. That's impossible. Chen Enterprises is bankrupt. I personally oversaw the asset liquidation. Then you should have looked closer, husband. The bankruptcy was a shell game. The real assets were transferred to a trust 3 years ago. Didn't you wonder why I was so calm when you were bleeding the company dry? I wasn't calm. I'd been terrified. But I'd also been busy. While Damon had been whining and dining Serafina in Monaco, I'd been working with a team of forensic accountants, untangling the web my father had woven before his death. Chen Enterprises hadn't just been a real estate firm, it had been a labyrinth of shell corporations, intellectual property holdings, and offshore accounts designed to protect the family from exactly this kind of betrayal. Xavier's money had been the key that unlocked everything. His $100 billion hadn't just given me buying power, it had activated clauses in my father's will that even I hadn't known existed. Trusts that required an external investment of that magnitude to fully vest. My father, it seemed, had anticipated everything. Let the auction continue, I said, rising from my seat. The spotlight followed me as I walked toward the stage. In fact, let's make this more interesting. Damon, darling, you want to sell my memories? Let's sell them all. Every single one. But I light the lantern on every lot. Every photo. Every video. Everything. The crowd was mesmerized. This was better than any reality show, any courtroom drama. This was a woman they'd all written off, rising from the ashes of her own destruction to burn down the man who'd tried to erase her. "You can't afford that," Damon hissed as I mounted the steps. "Even with Xavier's money, the lantern fees will bankrupt you." "Let me worry about my finances," I replied. "You worry about yours. Because once I'm done buying back every piece of myself you tried to sell, I'm going to take Sterling Industries apart, piece by piece. I'm going to sue you for breach of fiduciary duty, for emotional distress, for every dollar you funneled into Serafina's accounts while my company's employees were losing their retirement funds. I'm going to make sure that everyone in this room knows exactly what kind of man you are." I turned to face the audience, my back to the screen that still showed my exposed image. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're here for a show. So, let me give you one." Behind me is a photo taken on a night when I believed my husband loved me. When I believed that the man who held the camera valued the woman in front of it. I was wrong. But here's what I'm not wrong about. Every person in this room who bids on these images is complicit in a crime. Revenge porn is illegal in this state, even when the perpetrator is your spouse. So bid if you must. But know that every dollar you spend will be documented, every transaction traced, and every participant named in the civil suit I file tomorrow morning. Serafina stood, her composure cracking. "You can't do that. These were taken with consent." "Consent obtained under false pretenses is not consent," I shot back. "And when that consent is exploited for commercial gain, it becomes a felony." My lawyers, Knight Global's legal team, to be precise, are already drafting the complaints. You can ask Victor Cross about them. He's been on the receiving end of a Knight lawsuit before. Cost him $400 million and his reputation. Victor's face drained of color. He'd bid on the first lot. He'd been planning to bid on more. I addressed the auctioneer again. "Continue." "Lot number 1. Lantern lit. Do I hear any further bids, or shall we move to the next violation?" Damon grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. "You're destroying everything we built." "Everything I built," I corrected, shaking him off. "You were just the trophy husband I was too stupid to see through." "But I'm not stupid anymore, Damon. And I'm not broken. You want to know where I got the money? I got it from the man who actually loves me. Not the man who pretended to while stealing from my company's pension fund." That was a lie. Xavier didn't love me. Not like that. But the words had the desired effect. Damon's hand dropped, and he took a step back, his handsome face crumpling into something ugly and small. "Let's make this efficient," I said, pulling out a checkbook from my clutch. It was purely theatrical. Xavier's money moved digitally, but the gesture had power. "I'll write you a check for the full lantern price on all 365 lots right now. For $100 million per lot. That's $146 billion. In exchange, you sign over full rights to every image, every video, every piece of intellectual property you stole from me. And then you resign from Sterling Industries, effective immediately, and agree to a divorce settlement that gives you exactly nothing." The number was absurd. Obscene. It was more money than most countries' GDPs. But it was also a message. Xavier had taught me that in business, as in war, the goal wasn't just to win. It was to win so decisively that your enemy never dared rise against you again. Damon's lawyer rushed to his side, whispering frantically. I recognized him, Marcus Huang, a man who'd been on retainer with Chen Enterprises before Damon convinced me to switch allegiances. Another betrayal. Another thread in the tapestry of my destruction. "You can't enforce this," Marcus hissed. "These assets are marital property. You can't unilaterally." "They're not marital property," I interrupted. Every photo was taken on equipment I purchased with my own funds. Every video was stored on a server owned by Chen Enterprises, not Sterling Industries. And every location was a property held in my name prior to our marriage. I have the receipts. I have the contracts. I have the metadata. You have a client who's about to be indicted for corporate fraud, wire fraud, and distribution of non-consensual intimate imagery. So let's not quibble over details. I pulled a folder from my bag, the same bag Damon had bought me as a consolation gift after he'd missed our anniversary to attend a conference with Serafina in Ibiza. Inside were copies of every document I'd mentioned, plus a few extras. His bank statements showing transfers to Serafina's accounts, emails discussing the auction, texts planning my public humiliation. I was going to wait, I said, my voice dropping to something almost conversational. I was going to let you have your moment. I was going to let you believe you'd won. But then I remembered something my mother told me before she died. She said, Aria, the world will try to break you. Let it try. But never let them see you bleed. And when you strike back, make sure they never get up again. I turned to Serafina, who was now trembling visibly. You want to know what happens next? Next, I sue you for defamation, for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and for criminal theft. That necklace you're wearing? It belonged to my mother. I have the insurance photos and the certificate of authenticity. You can either return it now or I can have you arrested for grand larceny. Your choice. Her hands flew to her throat, to the sapphire pendant I'd noticed glittering against her skin. The same pendant from the photo on the screen behind me. She fumbled with the clasp, nearly dropping it as she pulled it free. An attendant scurried forward to collect it. Now, I said, turning back to the audience. This auction is over. The Sterling Auction House is hereby closed for business. I suggest you all leave before my security team arrives to escort you out. And remember, anyone who speaks to the press about what happened here tonight will find themselves named in my lawsuit. Discretion, as they say, is the better part of valor. The crowd began to dissipate, murmuring among themselves. The smart ones left quickly, heads down. The slower ones lingered, perhaps hoping for more drama, but my security team, Xavier's men, not Damon's, appeared at the exits, their presence unmistakable. Within minutes, the room was empty except for me, Damon, Serafina, and Marcus. What now? Damon asked, his voice hollow. You win. Is that what you want to hear? You win. Winning would be having my parents back, I said, the truth of it hitting me harder than I'd expected. Winning would be never having trusted you in the first place. But since I can't have that, I'll settle for this. You sign the papers I'm about to give you. You resign from Sterling Industries. You agree to a full audit of the company's finances. And you disappear. Leave Crestwood City. Leave the country. Because if I ever see your face again, I won't be so generous. He stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. You really loved me once, didn't you? I really did, I admitted. But that woman is dead. You killed her. And I built someone better from the pieces. I walked down the aisle, my heels clicking against the marble floor. At the exit, I paused. Oh, and Damon? The penthouse? It's in my name. Always has been. You have until noon tomorrow to collect your things. After that, everything goes to charity. Including your bespoke suits. I think the homeless shelter could use them. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. I took a deep breath, letting the city wash over me. A black Rolls-Royce idled at the curb, its windows tinted almost to opacity. The door opened as I approached. Xavier sat inside, his posture relaxed, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Well, he asked as I slid into the leather seat. Well, I replied, accepting the glass his driver offered me. I think that went rather well. He studied me for a moment, those sharp eyes seeing too much. You didn't enjoy it? No, I said, surprised to find it was true. I thought I would. I thought watching him crumble would feel like justice. But it just feels empty. Revenge is like that, Xavier said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. The fire that warms you also consumes you. The trick is to use it to forge something stronger, not let it burn you to ash. I sipped the whiskey, letting it burn down my throat. What happens now? Now, he said, we rebuild. Chen Enterprises, your reputation, your life. And when you're ready, we talk about what comes next. Next? He smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his face from handsome to breathtaking. Next, Aria Chen, you remember what it feels like to be loved by someone who doesn't want to own you. Someone who wants to stand beside you, not above you. I looked down at my hands, at the checkbook I'd used as a prop. At the sapphire pendant I'd just reclaimed. At the ring finger that still bore the ghost of my wedding band. That sounds complicated. The best things always are. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the auction house that had nearly been my tomb. In the rearview mirror, I could see Damon standing on the steps, a solitary figure in an empty plaza. He looked small, defeated, already fading into memory. I turned away, facing forward, toward whatever came next, toward the life I would build from the ashes of the one I'd lost, toward the future I'd promised my parents I would create, no matter the cost. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and amber as we drove, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something other than pain. I felt possibility. I felt power. I felt, impossibly, like myself again. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all.